La Liga is Spain's top-tier football competition and features some of the most valuable sports teams in the world. So, as you might expect, there are plenty of incredible stadiums. With that being said, here are La Liga 2021-22 stadiums. Camp Nou. We start off with Europe's largest stadium, and one that's presumably familiar to every football fan. It's home to Barcelona, one of the world's most famous sports teams. The exterior is nothing to write home about, but the interior is as imposing as it gets. It's made up of 3 tiers of wraparound seating, with the top tier tapering off to its lowest point under the stadium's only roof canopy. It's not the most technologically advanced stadium in the league, but certainly one of the most intimidating for the away team. Not far away is RCDE Stadium, a very modern design with plenty of covered seating, except for the corners which are left open to the elements, which is rather strange. But it's no big deal to have some uncovered seating in Spain, as we saw with the last one which had barely any. The interior is mainly made up of 2 tiers of seating, but there are some premium seats sandwiched in between. It looks pretty nice. I also like that there's plenty of space between the roof and the seats, allowing for some airflow. Not that it needed any more. Estadio San Mamés. It's one of the most visually striking stadium exteriors in the world. It's made up of hundreds or maybe even thousands of panels that have the capability of illuminating at night. Coupled with the location elevated above the river, makes for a spectacular sight. The inside is a little more typical, but it also looks rather nice. It shares a lot of similarities with Emirates Stadium and Estadio da Luz. It's one of the few stadiums that was so good, the team started playing in it before it was even finished. I don't blame them. Estadio Nuevo Mirandilla. The first thing you might notice is the spectacular beachside location. It's actually located on what is only a thin strip of land away from being an island. It's looking pretty sharp, this one, especially with all that glass on the exterior. Like a lot of stadiums in Europe, it's confined to a small space between roads, but it makes the most of the land it has, with the seating being very steep, which I'm a big fan of. And there's plenty of that in Spain. Estadio Martínez Valero. This one's a little more rudimentary, with its bare concrete exterior and symmetrical double-tiered seating layout. Its claim to fame is having hosted the biggest ever World Cup win, when Hungary defeated El Salvador 10-1 in 1982. They really were hungry. It's not a bad stadium, just not very unique. But judging by the semi-arid looking landscape, this looks like a place where you would want a completely uncovered stadium, to soak up the sun. It's the same reason Ireland has so many uncovered stadiums. To soak up the sun. Coliseum Alfonso Perez. Being sandwiched between a major highway and some apartment buildings, it's certainly not the most serene location. And with an average crowd of under 10,000, I'd imagine you'd just be hearing cars pass by throughout the match. But location aside, the design looks solid. And I do like how half of it appears to be sculpted into the earth, and the other half is fully above ground. But yeah, it is at least somewhat unique. Estadio Nuevo Los Cármenes. This too is a pretty unique design. You might not see it straight away, but if you look closely, the corners have been left empty, so you can see outside the stadium. Okay, that's not that unusual, but these sections can actually be filled with temporary seating, which is a really cool feature. I'm not sure why they didn't just build the seats there in the first place, but still. Other than that, it's a fairly typical Spanish football stadium. Wanda Metropolitano. Before Atletico Madrid came along, the stadium had a very funky design. It was known as the Comb. But the stadium you see today is a completely new stadium for all intents and purposes, although as you can see, they have incorporated the old design into the new one. I like that. I'm also a fan of the roof, especially how the lower perimeter undulates. The interior is just as spectacular. It's very modern, but it has enough uniqueness to set it apart from the other modern bowl-style stadiums. This is one of my favorites. Vallecas. Speaking of Atletico Madrid, this was actually their home ground for a few years, after the Spanish Civil War. The stadium has seating on just 3 sides, with just a wall on the other. You don't see that too often, but as you can see, even a few rows of seating would struggle to fit. But it does leave those living in these apartments with an excellent view of the field. It's a rustic old football ground that's far from being state of the art, but it's not too bad. It just kinda sucks that you have to keep asking your neighbor to throw the ball back though. Estadio Alfredo Di Stefano. This is where Real Madrid played most of their matches last year, but I'm not sure whether or not they would remain here if maximum capacity crowds are allowed. I think it might be a tad small. I'd imagine the matches will be held at the Metropolitano. As you are probably aware, the iconic Santiago Bernabeu is currently undergoing a major renovation that will transform it into something that's completely unrecognizable. It won't even look like a stadium from the outside. With its stainless steel exterior, it will look more like a giant kitchen appliance, in a good way. Once complete, it will undoubtedly be Europe's flashiest stadium, and Spain's only football stadium with a retractable roof. It's not expected to be finished until late 2022, but I look forward to it. Visit Mallorca Stadium. Clearly they've been bought out by the Mallorca Tourist Board. Disappointing. I know a lot of stadiums have corporate names, but Visit Mallorca Stadium does not roll off the tongue. I'm quite disappointed that they sold out. Anyway, if you're not aware, Mallorca is an island off the coast of Spain. And there's so much to do, so much to see. Mallorca is the place to be. Bring all your money. Yeah, I sold out too, but that's completely different. You can tell just by looking at it that it was made for some sort of big event that involved athletics. And it was. The Universiade to be specific. That's right, the Universiade, that famous sporting event that is definitely worth building a stadium for. But no, I'm sure it's a great event. And the stadium's not bad either. It's just not really fit for purpose in more ways than one. Visit Mallorca now. Do it now. Estadio El Sadar. It's fresh off a major expansion and renovation that was completed just last year. If you compare the current stadium to what it used to look like, you can see that the main stand has stayed roughly the same, but the 3 smaller stands have been raised to its level more or less. It looked perfectly fine beforehand, but it's looking incredible now. Well done. Reale Arena. It's another one coming off a major renovation, but this was a few years ago. It completely transformed it from an okay stadium with a track around the field into the far superior rectangular stadium that we see today. It looks absolutely stunning both inside and out. If you were to compare it with their Basque Country rivals, I think the exterior falls just short, but the interior might be even better, or at least on par. But it's always going to be difficult to top San Mamés. Estadio Benito Villamarin. It shares a similar design to Martínez Valero, which I said didn't have anything that sets it apart. Well, this one definitely does. For starters, it has 3 tiers of seating rather than 2, but you'll notice the rather striking design on the seating. That's not something you see every day. Pretty cool. It was actually only a recent addition. In fact, this is what it looked like 6 or 7 years ago. Those green seats as well, they look great. It might be the biggest green stadium in the world. Comment below if there's another one that's bigger. Of course, Twickenham. And just a few kilometers away is Estadio Ramon Sanchez Pizjuan, a stadium that looks rather similar, like really similar. If I change it to green, it will look more or less the same, except it's a little smaller and has just 2 tiers of seating. Something else that sets it apart is this beautiful mosaic on the western side of the stadium. But yeah, it's just so similar that I can't say much else. I guess the exterior does look slightly better, and it is a continuous bowl rather than having a detached main stand like the last one. Estadio Ciutat de la Valencia. Once again, I'm repeating myself, it's a very similar design, only smaller. But wait a minute! They've just recently upgraded the facility and it now includes a wraparound roof canopy that covers some of the seats. This upgrade has made the world of difference, so it goes to show, if you're not too happy with the way your house looks, an investment as little as 30 million euros goes a long way. And just a couple of clicks away is Estadio de Mestalla. Valencia have infamously been constructing a brand new stadium for 14 years. Yes, you heard that right. As you can see, they got a fair way into the construction and then the global financial crisis came along, which hit Spain very hard. So it just sits there now, collecting dust and Funko Pops. But there is a silver lining. It means that this extraordinary stadium will stick around. If the incredibly steep stands aren't enough, then the huge depiction of a bat should be enough to call this stadium one of a kind. It is actually the oldest stadium in the league, so perhaps there are some underlying issues that warranted a new stadium to be built. And of course there are the lawsuits that Batman filed in the early 2000s that still haven't been resolved. Abanca Balados. It's yet another one that's undergone some major renovations in recent years. I think you can probably tell just by looking at it which sections have had work done. I am of course talking about those areas covered in the metallic blue facade. The work is still ongoing and it will eventually look like this. So it's quite similar to Real Arena, in that it will go from round to rectangular. Even in its partially finished state, I think it looks pretty good, and that metallic finish is quite distinctive. Estadio de la Cerámica. Maybe it's just the steep blue and yellow seats, but it reminds me a little of La Bombonera in Buenos Aires, which is certainly no bad thing. But it does have its own unique aspects that set it apart, such as this section that just keeps going up. Don't sit up here if you suffer from vertigo. But yeah, it's an interesting stadium, this one. I quite like it. Mendizorroza. Sorry to the Spanish people watching, that was a pretty bad pronunciation. But if you've watched this far, you're probably used to it. It's a bit of a change up from all the others we've seen in this league. It's like many that you see further north in Europe, with its compact design and a roof covering every seat in the house basically. They did plan on expanding the facility in 2020. Then the pandemic struck and it had to be delayed. This is what it's set to turn into. As you can see, the renovation won't make the stadium unrecognizable like Real Madrid's, but it certainly will be a major change. And those were La Liga 2021-22 stadiums. If you enjoyed the video, please consider subscribing. Thanks for watching, have a good one.